Hi, welcome to the small shed. This Saturday I've got a small repair to do for one of my mending sheds colleagues. See you in a minute. Now this is today's bit of repair work. It's one I normally quite like doing this sort of thing because, as I've said before, you've usually got nothing to lose, and this is ostensibly to me a bit of old tap that wants repairing, but apparently it has some sentimental value to the people concerned, and that's why I never like getting too involved, because you're dealing with something which is, to somebody anyway, precious, and so there is quite a lot to lose. It's the top of a lamp. I think it's just holding a lampshade, and originally it's had a holder on top of the hoop there, and then I think the hoop screws down onto two uprights, and presumably there's a bulb in there and a shade on top, and then that just screws down over it. I don't know, I think that's what it is. It's had an attempt at a repair before, which has obviously failed. Ideally it wants a tack with a welder, I think, because we're dealing with steel and it would weld. Unfortunately I don't weld, so we're going to have to make do and mend. Now I can solder with steel, it is possible. It normally needs quite a bit of heat. Ideally again it wants silver solder, because soldering itself has no massive inherent strength. But I think I might have a way that will get us somewhere close. It has to be scrupulously clean. Again, it's had a bit of an attempt at doing that. Does look like that's a solid rod, not a tube, which is sort of good. And it will need a lot of heat, because there's quite a big chunk of metal there, quite a big chunk there. It's not the sort of thing you can be holding like you can with soldering wire and anything. And to do that, I think I'm going to resort to my little blowtorch that I've got. It's quite delicate, you can point the flame quite well. We'll end up with a bit of scorched wood somewhere down the line, I'm sure. But we'll see how we get on. What I think I'm going to do, and these things do have a habit of changing, to get a bit more strength into this joint, because at the moment you're just literally trying to solder a nut onto a round bar, which should not work very well. Let's just bring you in a bit. What I think I'm going to do is to cut a slot into that nut that will enable that bar to go up or sink down into there, and by doing that it not only gives me a bit of a mechanical grip if we make it nice and tight, but it gives us a lot more soldering connection, rather than just the two flats on there. You've got the whole thing bathed in solder. So I think that's what I'm going to do, and in many ways that's not too destructive, in that it's only a nut which, you know, you can replace, that you're doing any huge damage to, whereas this bit here I you know, is something I wouldn't be able to do anything with if I screwed up too badly. So that's the first step. I'm going to get this in the vise and cut a slot in it with the piercing saw that will enable me to drop that into it, down about halfway down I think, and we'll go on from there. I've got myself a pack of blades because I'll no doubt get through a few, and all I'm going to do now is just start and cut myself a groove with the little jeweler's piercing saw, hopefully slightly undersized, and then I can just file it out to shape. But it's just a fairly long, laborious sort of a job really. You can't rush this, and seeing as we've got steel, it's going to take a while because you're trying to cut steel with steel. But we're getting down, it's already in a couple of millimeters. So we just do 2 slots and then go round underneath and try and join them together. Get the 2 pieces out. Maybe a bit of lubrication perhaps as well, will help. I think we're doing quite well. We're still on the same blade. We've done the 2 vertical cuts and I'm just about halfway across the bottom. So I'm quite pleased that that's gone without too many blades broken. And I think it's stretched quite a bit. 1 gone, 2 gone, that's it, lovely. So that's got the notch cut, probably need a bit of filing up, but that should now start to get close to sitting in there. What I can also do is I can thin that down a bit if I want to. But we can now start and file the slot up a bit to shape. Right, I've cleaned it up as much as I can and I've wiped it over with isopropyl alcohol. There's a little bit of rust still in amongst this lot that I can't really get at because it's between the nut and the threaded shaft, but I'm hoping there's enough there to be able to get a key on top, on the top of the nut as well. I've given this a wipe over as well with isopropyl alcohol, so that is now ready to solder to. That sits into there, so I've increased by, 50% at least the contact area. And I've also had a thought that if it does hold, I can drop down epoxy resin down into that shaft hole, and that will give a bit of extra mechanical grip at the bottom as well later on. So I need to solder those 2 together. Now if I just put it together like that and solder it, I'm going to end up with something that's a bit wonky because it's at a strange angle. So I want to keep these things level. What I want to do is to clamp this down. If I can keep these things in mid-air, it means I don't end up having to heat up, I don't know, a brick or something else that's heat absorbent, that's going to take a lot of the heat away from this lot. And to keep that at about the right height, I've got another block of wood that's slightly lower, that's on that sort of level. If I put those 2 together now, I've got a decent joint there. Those 2 will be at the right angles. Now, as is often the case, I've had a rethink. I decided that if I put these things on their side to solder, gravity would tend to drag the solder down and I'd only really get one decent face soldered up. So I'm going to change around a bit and go for putting the bolt flat on the ground like that and coming in above with something there that will just go underneath it. I've wired up the little collets so they don't drop into the mix, and that way I can get the solder to lie on flat on the nut, which is much more likely to be a decent mechanical fix. I'm just going to put some flux on the joint now. This does two things really. It is there to provide cleaning of the joint. It's usually some sort of an acid in it, so we'll get it into all of the surfaces. The other thing it does, it helps the solder flow into the joints once it gets up to temperature. So we'll get loads of flux on it. We can clean that up later. It just usually just burns off and runs off any liquid that's surplus after it's done its job. But in this case I'm going to need all the help I can get, I think. Right, crank up the blow lamp. Things I'll need for this. Firstly, make sure you've got some means of putting fires out to hand, and I've got my solder. Nice little blow lamp, gets quite a bit of heat out. I'll just start and warm it up gently and see how we go. You'll see the flux will start to melt virtually straight away. And that will hopefully clean everything up, and then we can just get a little bit further in and start and put a blob there, and once that blob of solder starts to melt properly, you'll see it go flash into a puddle rather than a blob. We'll know we're up to temperature, but it's going to need quite a lot of heat in here to get to that point. And it's all got to be up to temperature, the whole nut and everything else. Now that's flashed in there. That's, you see, it almost gets like it gets eaten up by the joint. You put it on and it just gets sucked in. So that's starting to work nicely now. We can worry about cleaning it up afterwards. If we get it over the outside, it's very soft, but it's more important to just get this stuff into the joint as much as we can, put as much strength in it as we can. Right, I think that's as much as I'm going to get in. We will let that cool down and see what we've got. There's no point in trying to hurry it. It weakens it if you try and cool it down too much. But hopefully we've got a decent bond in there. And again, if I needed to, we could probably get a mechanical fixing over the top with epoxy just on this top here to bond it to the nut as well. But I think that's as much as I can get. We will let it cool down and see what we've got. Let's see what happens if we lift it out. Well, at least it's still attached. It looks to be vertical and attached that way. So, still a bit warm, but let's cut it out of its bindings and take a look. Well, it feels mechanically solid, so I'm happy with that. I think that's going to do its job. It will hold a lampshade without any great problem, I'm sure. So really all it needs to do now is get all this solder cleared off and tidied up, and we'll give it a bit of a file up and clean up, and away we go. I'm just going to finish off this top bit that's all rusty and the joint itself. Got a little bit of brass finish spray. I'm just going to do around that area, so it should blend it all in nicely, I hope. Doesn't need a lot, but it just takes off that nastiness in the thing. That's it, I think. No point in overdoing it. Right, so that's got the little lamp holder, or lampshade holder I think it is, sorted and repaired, and I've got the best job I think I can do on it. It's solid enough mechanically, it's better than I thought it would be. I'm not going to bother with the epoxy at the moment because it feels so rigid. The solder seems to have flowed in nicely all the way around. So I'll return that, and if there's any problems we can always bring it back. Now I've got some idea of how it all works. Hope it was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be doing something different on the channel, and I hope to see you then. Bye!